Are you excited about the new cards in Amonkhet? Are you keen to try something different at FNM when new standard rolls around? Do you like brains? Delicious brains? Well then, stick around as I talk you through Esper Zombies. Hey, it's Vincent here, and welcome to Vincent Games, your untapped source of Magic the Gathering info, tips, and discussion. Now, I promised you a zombie deck, and Amonkhet is not disappointing. With a whole bunch of aggressively costed zombies, it wouldn't surprise me if we really start to see this archetype take off as we move into Amonkhet Standard. Whether it will be good enough to go toe-to-toe with Copycat and Mardu vehicles is another thing, but for now, let's have a look at some of the awesome undead brewing potential we have with Amonkhet. This deck starts out with a full 4 copies of Dread Wanderer and Wayward Servant. Dread Wanderer is a fine 1-drop, and the ability to get him back synergizes really nicely with Wayward Servant. The ability on Wayward Servant may look a little bit inconspicuous, but the draining effect is going to add up really quickly. Another card that will synergize very nicely with this, and to help really lay on the pain with the life loss, is Relentless Dead. As a 2-2 with Menace that we can return to our hands or use to bring back other zombies, everyone's favourite mythic zombie is a perfect fit into a Wayward Servant deck. And I'm going with 3 copies to really try and abuse this. I could imagine this deck easily wanting 4 of these, but I've gone with 3 for now, given that we want to be doing other stuff with our mana as well as using his abilities. At 3 mana we have 3 copies of Lord of the Accursed, as well as 2 Diregraff Colossus and 2 Plague Belcher. Lord of the Accursed is great pumping all the zombies, and even giving you the additional angle of Menace on all your guys to make for a nasty attack at some point in the game. Sometimes you just need to push through damage, and Lord of the Accursed helps with this big time. Build up an army of zombies and then charge in with a one-sided combat. A 2-2 split of Plague Belcher and Diregraff Colossus. Going with a 2-2 split as they both offer very different things, but you don't want too many of either. Diregraff Colossus relies on zombies in the graveyard to get big, and casting too many Plague Belchers could potentially be a liability if you're killing too much of your own stuff. However, the Diregraff's ability to pump out free zombies just from you casting zombies is awesome, and it synergizes nicely with Wayward Servant, meaning he deserves his 2 slots in this deck. Plague Belcher is a weird one. At worst, he's a 3-2 with Menace, which isn't fantastic, but his ability to ping our opponent every time a zombie dies is something we don't want to overlook. Imagine a scenario where you've cast Dread Warrior into Wayward Servant into Plague Belcher. That's not a particularly unrealistic sequence of play, and assuming your opponent doesn't just kill the Wayward Servant on the spot. When you cast the Plague Belcher, you drain your opponent for 1, kill a Dread Wanderer, pinging your opponent for another 1 damage, and then you can bring the Dread Wanderer back to drain your opponent again. And this is what this deck is all about. Casting zombies and slowly building up values. Oh yeah, and you still have 9 power worth of creatures. All of a sudden, that 3-2 with Menace just became a 5-4 with Menace. If you're casting the Plague Belcher on curve, you are threatening to end the game very quickly. My only issue with this guy is he doesn't match up to Grasp of Darkness all that well. The other cards we have at 3 mana are 2 copies of Bontu's Monument and 4 Prized Amalgam. Prized Amalgam is one of the reasons we are playing blue in this deck, and the ability to bring him back is exactly what the Zombie Doctor ordered. This deck uses Prized Amalgam very differently to how the Grixis or Black-Red zombies have used him. Normally you see ways to discard him into the grave and then bring back other creatures in order to put a crazy amount of power on the table very quickly. But this deck is playing along an altogether different axis, creating a steady incremental advantage through life loss, recursion, and zombie tokens. Speaking of incremental advantage, Bontu's Monument helps us to do exactly that, reducing the cost of most of our spells by 1 mana and allowing us a further life drain effect whenever we cast a creature spell. A copy of this and Wayward Servant on the table means those little bits of damage will quickly add up, and the cost reduction on all our creatures will help you get there even faster. The last 2 creatures we have are at 4 mana, and they are Haunted Dead and Gisa and Geralf, 2 of each. The Haunted Dead's ability to provide us with a 1-1 flyer is nice. It might not be a zombie, but those extra points of flying damage can help to steal a game, combined with all these drain effects. It's also a great way to return Prized Amalgam to the battlefield, outside of Dread Warrior and Relentless Dead. And so is Gisa and Geralf. Just 2 copies of this, as it's a legend and not a zombie. However, the ability to cast creatures from our graveyard is exactly what this deck wants. It synergizes with Prized Amalgam, Bontu's Monument, Wayward Servant. There's so many key cards in the deck and really pushes it over the top. Imagine you have a fairly average board state of Wayward Servant and Bontu's Monument on the battlefield, and a Prized Amalgam and Diregraff Colossus in the graveyard. If on turn 4 you cast Gisa and Geralf, when it gets to turn 5 you can untap, cast the Colossus for only 2 mana from your grave, draining your opponent for 2 life and returning a Prized Amalgam, and you'd still have another 2, potentially 3 if you play a land that turn mana, to cast another zombie spell. And now that you've just brought back a Diregraff Colossus, every zombie you cast is not only going to drain your opponent for 2 life, but create you a 2-2 zombie as well, which would then drain your opponent once again. And this is exactly what this deck is all about. Each card individually seems okay, but when you start stacking the effects of all of this together, the life loss and card advantage can stack up, as over the course of a game you steadily drain your opponent and aggressively trade away your creatures, only to bring them back and do it all over again. To round out the deck and to make sure we don't get overwhelmed by opposing aggressive strategies, we have 3 Fatal Push. The card is solid. As well as that, we have 3 Never to Returns. Whilst potentially a little bit pricey, it's great, especially when you consider the aftermath part of the card, generating a free zombie if you have nothing else to do with your mana. The incidental Graveyard Hate is quite nice too. Finally, what kind of zombie deck would this be without a Necromancer around to call the shots? 2 of Liliana the Last Hope and 2 of Liliana's Expertise. I don't think Liliana the Last Hope is essential in this deck, and if budget is a concern, then you can definitely cut this card for more removal. As some of you may be thinking, no, Grasp of Darkness, that would be an easy swap out. That's not to say Liliana and Grasp of Darkness are the same sort of power level, but if budget is a concern for you, then that would be an easy swap out to make. And lastly, we have Liliana's Expertise. An additional pump effect to the zombies to help force through more damage and really overwhelm our opponent is a welcome little addition, but given the higher mana cost of the card, we only want 2 of these here. It has obvious synergies with the deck, and even on its own makes 6 power worth of zombies, which is unusual in these glorious Anthem effects. Normally we just get the ability to make our creatures bigger, so the fact that this actually makes zombie tokens is really nice. Lastly, for the land, we have 4 Concealed Courtyard, 4 Shambling Vents, and 4 Revolving Wilds. 12 sources of both black and white. This is quite a lot of white considering we're only splashing the 1 white for Wayward Servant, but the fact that we want this on turn 2 warrants the heavy commitment to white. Not only that, but it's easy to forget. In order to activate Shambling Vents, you also need white, so it's important to have plenty of white mana available. After that, we have 3 Sunken Hollow, 1 Prairie Stream, 1 Plains, 1 Island, and 4 Swamps. The Prairie Stream might be a little bit dangerous considering the heavy commitment to black, so it might be something to cut and replace with the 4th Sunken Hollow, just to be on the safe side. Between Evolving Wilds, Shambling Vent and the other non-basics, there is potentially quite a lot of tap lands here. However, given the quite low curve of this deck, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. And between Evolving Wilds and a decent number of basics, the Sunken Hollows and Prairie Stream should be entering the battlefield untapped most of the time. As for the sideboard, against really controlling strategies, we have 2 Transgress the Mind and 2 Negate. Against more aggressive decks, we have 3 Yahenni's Expertise and 2 Kalitas Traitor of Ghet. 3 Cast Out to deal with any planeswalkers or indestructible gods that we can't deal with, as all our removal destroys things, and 3 Authority of the Consuls because Copycat. Having a way to shut that down is still going to be really important for a while. Even if you draw multiple copies against 4-colour Copycat, the life gain would be really great because they cast a lot of creatures outside of the Shahili combo anyway, and having them all come in tap is really going to help to swing the damage race in your favour, while you gain silly amounts of life and can swing in with Reckless Abandon. So there you have it, Esper Zombies, which in fairness is primarily mono black zombies with a couple of little splashes, but splashes I think you'll agree really help make the deck tick. I hope this whets your appetite for Amonkhet and helps encourage some deck ideas of your own, as what's really appealing to me about this new set is the potential for new decks. I really like the direction this zombie deck is trying to take. It's very different to the traditional fill up your graveyard and then empty your graveyard strategies that normally associated with cards like Prized Amalgam and Haunted Dead, but one instead that shambles relentlessly at your opponent, steadily draining them for life and generating card advantage. Other cards that I haven't included in the deck. There were so many other cards that you could add to this deck. Collective Brutality, Key to the City, Scrap Heap Scrounger, and you could definitely splash red for cards like Cathartic Reunion, Grixis Direction we've seen before, which is why I'm so excited for Amonkhet. There are so many good cards. There's so much choice at the moment, as it feels like there's so much potential with what we're seeing. Heck, I could have even put Bontu the Glorified himself in this, or Liliana Death's Majesty. And in fairness, either of those would fit perfectly into this deck and add yet more layers of synergy, which just highlights again the possibilities that are there with Amonkhet. But that's it from me. I hope you like the deck. Something like this would be great fun to try out at FNM. And given the incremental card advantage and life gain you grind out in a game, it might even give Mardu Vehicles and Copycat a run for their money. But that's all from me for now. Don't forget to let me know what you think of this deck in the comments below. Is it just a pile of cards, or is it something that you think has got legs? I think it's got some potential, but it would be really good to hear what you think as well. If you like this video, then consider subscribing, as I fully intend to make more videos like this to showcase the different deck possibilities that are out there with Standard. In the meantime, I've also done some modern deck techs and modern matches on Magic Online as well, so check out the links below if you're interested in that as well. Thanks a lot for watching and stay tuned for more.